Hello and welcome to another edition of Only in Illinois, your weekly video recap from Reboot Illinois. I'm Madeline Dubeck here with Matt Dietrich, ready to rock it in 2016. And already rocketing to the top of the charts is the campaign finance nuclear warfare between Governor Bruce Rauner and House Speaker Michael Madigan.
Right. We should probably give a little background here. You may or may not remember that in 2009, the Illinois General Assembly passed the first campaign contribution limit law in Illinois. That was in the immediate aftermath of the Rod Blagojevich scandal, and Illinois was eager to do some reforming. And one of the charges against Blagojevich was he was trying to extort campaign contributions from, you might remember, from a racetrack owner. Was one of the wiretaps that we heard. So the General Assembly passed a bill that puts limits in place on individuals. Basically, you and I can give $5,400 per candidate per election. A corporation can give $10,800. So
exactly.
So
just to clear up one thing before you go on, when you say in each election, so 2016 is not one election,
right,
it's actually two elections. The primary, March 15th, the general election, November 8th. So you and I could give $5,400 to our favorite candidate if we chose to for the primary, and then another $5,400 in the fall. Okay.
Per election. So the big talk had been throughout the fall that Governor Bruce Rauner has this huge campaign fund. He's got $19.6 million. He donated a year ago on New Year's Eve 2014. He put another $10 million into his fund. And he had said at the time, and has said all along, that he's going to use that money to help Republicans get elected to the Illinois General Assembly, where right now Democrats hold supermajorities in both the House and the Senate.
Right.
And, you know, Illinois has never seen a candidate or an office holder like Bruce Rauner before, someone with this kind of wealth who's willing to put that much of his own wealth into first his own campaign, where he just gave $38 million, and then now bringing in millions and millions of dollars to support his party.
And he has another.
And he's got a super PAC as well.
Independent expenditure committee.
Right.
Called Turnaround Illinois. Okay.
And that's an important distinction, because super PACs, independent expenditure committees, they can help out candidates, but they can't coordinate with those candidates. So they can go out and buy advertising on behalf of or in opposition to a candidate, but they can't get with the candidate and coordinate advertising
and so forth.
Right. So what the big story has been is that Rauner has this giant fund that he can freely distribute to candidates he wants to support, whereas the Democrats were so far behind. And in December, we saw House
Which has never been the case before. Usually Mike
years.
Madigan is far and away leading
For years,
everybody.
the Democrats have been light years ahead of Republicans in fundraising, which has led to the current situation where for the last, until Bruce Rauner came along, you had complete Democratic control, governor's office and both chambers of the General Assembly. So all the talk was how Rauner was just swamping Madigan and the Democrats are never going to be able to catch up. Well, in December, House Speaker Michael Madigan did some serious catching up. He raised $3 million in 4 different political funds that he controls. He now, in those funds, has $9.1 million, which is far less than Rauner's $19.6 million. However, it really showed how he's got considerable power, Madigan does, to really rally his supporters to his side. This is where the campaign contribution limits law comes into play.
Okay. Because
unions can give $53,900 in each election. With Madigan controlling 4 different committees, however, they can effectively give 8 times that amount to him, 1 to each committee for each election. That's pretty significant. They're also going to be very willing to do that, and they have shown it. The Chicago Tribune analyzed Madigan's committees for 2015, and found that 68% of the donations had come from
Unions.
unions and trial lawyers who don't like all Rauner's talk about tort reform and lawsuit reform. So what we have now is a situation where the unions, having endured a year of Bruce Rauner really ginning up his
Right.
anti-union rhetoric, are now going to fight back, and they donated heavily. And I think what we saw in December is probably just the beginning, because we're getting very close to the March 15th primaries, and more importantly, once we're past that and the general election season
Right.
gets underway, then you're going to see really heavy change.
Everything gets unleashed.
Right. There's one other thing that we need to point out here, and when we talk about campaign contribution limits from 2009, you have to keep in mind those limits really only pertain to money coming outside the system into it. They pertain limits to us giving to the candidates or to whatever political action committee or party we want to give to. Once that money is in the system, though, the candidates are pretty free to share that money with fellow candidates. And in the case of Rauner, for example, you have a candidate committee. His own Citizens for Rauner committee has almost $20 million. He can give any portion of that he wants. He could give it all to the Illinois Republican Party. And the Illinois Republican Party has no limits, because political party committees have no limits on how much they can distribute to individual candidates. This is where it's going to get very interesting, and this is where you get these proxy wars happening, where you'll have effectively Bruce Rauner funding the Republican candidates, no matter how strong they are,
Right.
how much local support they have, kind of becomes irrelevant, because you have leaders behind them just funneling big money into them in races where they think they might win.
So on the other side, you have Mike Madigan, who is the
Exactly
chairman
right.
of the Democratic Party of Illinois. And so he controls that Democratic Party of Illinois fund, and he can take a huge chunk of that money and give it to whichever candidate or handful or two handfuls of candidates has a really competitive race
Right.
in the fall as well.
Right, and this has been something that reformers have long railed against,
Right.
and it was a pretty, I think, a big shortcoming in the 2009 law. Although it was hard getting that law passed even as it was. So you can't complain about it too much. But
Yeah.
the issue of leader limits, of limiting the amount
Right.
that leaders can freely funnel to these candidates, has always been a big one, because when the election is over, you're going to find that a lot of these candidates for the General Assembly get 90% of their whole campaign spending comes from the
Mike Madigan
if
or
they're running
Bruce
for the
Rauner.
House, or John Cullerton, or
Right.
Jim Durkin, or Christine Radonio
Right.
this time.
Yes.
In the past, for years, it's always been a complaint, because it's been the Democrats who have been able to funnel all the money because they've had the money. Now we're going to have, I don't know if it'll be an even playing field. It's going to be an expensive playing field, and you're going to see a lot of money get shuffled.
And so the other effect of that reformers are concerned about is, when 90% of your funding comes from Mike Madigan, are you really going to
Right.
vote independently
Right.
and defy him? Are you going to vote for your constituents, or are you going to vote the way your leader wants you to,
Sure.
who gave you all the money to win?
Because if you cross your leader who's financed you, then if you're in the House, then in 2 years you may well be out.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So it does a lot of good for party discipline and the
Right.
rank and file following their leaders, but not much for independence and truly representative government.
Right, and I have to say that it does, the intent of the 2009 limits law really was to get at pay to play. And I think by limiting the amount, you are doing that. There are a lot of other reforms pertaining to that as well.
But as usual, in the case of campaign
But you can
finance,
get around it.
you find a loophole and you
That's
drive
right.
the truck through it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's it for this week's edition of Only in Illinois. The primary campaign is just a few months away. We'll have much more on that in the weeks ahead, so please come back and join us again.